He began his journey in 1974 at the Nebraska State Penitentiary as an institutional counselor. Since that time, his journey has led him to a wide range of positions in the correctional field, including Director of Nebraska Department of Corrections, Secretary of the Washington State Department of Corrections, and Commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. He has also made significant contributions to the American Correctional Association, serving as the Treasurer, Vice President, and President, as well as a member of the Board of Governors and the Delegate Assembly. As a result of his dedication and exceptional leadership, he was awarded the American Correctional Association ER-CAS Correctional Achievement Award, a very distinguished honor. Recognized as a forward thinker who stresses the importance of rehabilitation and successful re-entry of the inmates under his supervision, and now serving as the Director of the Virginia Department of Corrections, join me in welcoming Mr. Harold Clarke.
Good evening. Good evening. She read that introduction exactly the way I wrote it. As we will see later on as I get into my text, this is something that's much needed because of the challenge and its significance. I would like to begin, however, by using an admonishment that I once heard a speaker use before speaking to his audience. He said, "I am here to speak and you to listen. If by chance you complete your task before I do mine, please let me know." And I prefer kindly. Do it kindly. You know, as I sat and listened to those who went before me, spoke before me, especially those who have experienced incarceration, the thought came back to mind, a statement that was made by one of our forefathers, the forefather of this nation. He said, "I like the dream of tomorrow better than the history of yesterday." And that's what it's all about, folks. You see, because in the dream of tomorrow, we have hope. In the dream of tomorrow, we can see the light. In the dream of tomorrow, all of our needs and our wants can be addressed. So I dare not only those who have experienced incarceration to dream. Dreaming is something that we all need to do, because those who have experienced incarceration comes from communities that are continuing to send offenders to the system, or send people to the system. And those communities need to be able to dream as well of a better tomorrow. And not only dream upon it, but to act upon those dreams. Because I've heard it once said as well, that a dream without action often becomes a nightmare. And so we need to dream and we need to act as well. The Department of Corrections believes firmly in this event's theme: all lives matter. You see, because we are in the business of helping people to be better. That's what we're called to do. We are called to help people to be better. The Department of Corrections has a very wonderful mission and vision statement. And I know it's wonderful because I was one of the authors. So that's a joke. But I did author it with other people. I was responsible for putting it in place. And I think it captures all what we would like to see done. let me share it with you. It reads, "We enhance the quality of life in the Commonwealth by improving public safety. We accomplish this through the reintegration of sentenced men and women in our custody and care by providing supervision and control, effective programs and reentry services in safe environments which foster positive change and growth consistent with evidence-based practices, fiscal responsibility, and constitutional standards." Yes, that is 56 words. That says a lot. If you didn't catch every bit of it, if you didn't catch every word, I can sum it up for you. Simply stated, we are in the business of helping people to be better. We help people to make better decisions. We help people to make better choices. That is, in essence, what we do for our returning citizens and for our staff alike. You may say now, so what is he talking about? That's what we do for our returning citizens and for our staff alike. If you have studied sociology, and if you understand institutions, specifically correctional institutions, you will know that not everyone that walks in the door of correctional facility as an employee is of like mind. They don't all share the vision and the mission of the agency, even though they're qualified for employment and have all the credentials. They come from all different walks of life. And with them, they bring their philosophies. They bring their biases. And so it's a challenge to get the mission accomplished if the organization, if those who make up the organization are not prepared to carry out the vision and the mission of the organization. And that's the challenge that we face. Now, I'm already deviating from my text. And if I go down that road too far, you're going to be in big trouble. So, I'll try not to do that too much. But we are in a very dynamic organization where change is a must. And if we are not capable of changing, then we will not be responsive to the needs of those in our care, and we will not be able to carry out the mission that has been codified and given to us. So you have to first prepare the organization if we are going to be true to our mission. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So in essence, what we do is what Failsafe sets out to do. Failsafe's ERA's motto is changing lives, is rebuilding communities, and healing families. That's what we do. That's what we do in the Department of Corrections. We use other words often to describe it, but our charge is similar. We act as independent partners. We are working on the same challenges from different angles and perspectives. The challenge is significant. The challenge is significant. I am going to describe to you the challenge that we face in part in the department, just as we address the needs of those entrusted to our care. But the challenge doesn't begin nor end at that point. The challenge begins well before they come to us in the community. It does not begin with the Department of Corrections and the Department of Corrections does not own this issue. It begins in the community. And that's why the community must dare to dream of a better reality, of a better community that can better support all the members of the community. We are all responsible. But the challenge, a portion of that challenge, I'm going to paint a picture for you in terms of what the Department of Correctional Services face in preparing offenders for reentry. Let's take a look at the issue of mental health. Their disorders of mental health are 6 times higher for individuals incarcerated than for those who are found in the community at large. Women incarcerated, and this is not just true for Virginia, I saw the same thing in Massachusetts, Washington, and Nebraska. In Virginia, women incarcerated, 60% of them have a mental health diagnosis. In Massachusetts, it was 62, in Nebraska, it was 58, in Washington, it was 60. So, their problems didn't begin in prison. They had mental health conditions in the community. Why were they not addressed? Why were they not addressed? Men today incarcerated, 24% of the men have a mental health diagnosis. Half of the people in jails and prisons have substance abuse disorders. They did not begin in prison. They began in the community. 85% of prisoners in the Virginia DOC are impacted by substance abuse. 25% are sentenced for having violated drug law crimes. And 60% have histories of substance abuse. That's where that 85% comes from. 50% of the incarcerated were homeless the year before their incarceration. The community wasn't taking care of them. 15% were incarcerated, were homeless before incarceration. 2 out of 5 inmates that come to us lack a high school diploma. Our schools failing us, and so then what are we doing about it? 2 out of 5 lack a high school diploma. 80% of the inmates that arrive at the doorsteps of the department are reading at or below the 9th grade level. 50% are doing mathematical computations at or below the 5th grade level. They can't balance the checkbook. Offenders also possess spotty and low employment histories. That's in part what we're dealing with when offenders come to us as we prepare them for reentry. But coupled with that is criminal thinking that many bring along with them. They're not able to process responsibly because of their thought process. So let's take a look on children and family members of these offenders. Approximately 3 million children in the United States have at least one parent incarcerated. 3 million children. Those are the children that we all describe as the kids that are at risk. And indeed, they are at risk. Throughout my career, or during my career, I have seen grandfathers, fathers, and sons in the same prison at the same time. And I've seen it, grandfathers leaving and sons and grandsons coming in, and daughters doing the same thing. So that's that cycle of crime and punishment, that quagmire that a large section of our communities find themselves in. Is that being addressed responsibly? Who should be addressing it? Who is looking there? Who is tackling it? While I was in Massachusetts, I worked with Dr. Bruce Wester, the professor at Harvard University, sociologist, who did a lot of work in this area, and was shown that what's going on is invisible. It's invisible because it's removed from society and placed in prisons, thrown out all over rural America. So out of sight, out of mind. So it's invisible. What's going on is cumulative. And what's going on is generational. What are we doing about it, society? What are we doing about it? Large segments of our population has been relegated to lives that are substandard. Who is doing anything about it? Is it known? We can all read and write. It's obvious. But who is doing anything about it? We are going through life in the United States of America as though it's just another day. While the 3 million children are lining up to come to prison. Those lives are thrown away. Who is doing anything about it? The research suggests that 1 in every 28 children in America have a parent who is incarcerated in either prison or jail. The earlier figure I gave you of 3 million that had at least one parent incarcerated, that was a figure for prisons. Now this figure of 28 children, that 1 in every 28 children in America that have a parent incarcerated, that applies to both prisons and jails as well in the United States. Nationally, over 1/2 of all prisoners have children who are under the age of 18. About 45% of prisoners were living with their children just prior to incarceration, which begs another question. Only 45% were living with their children. What's going on in our culture? What's going on in our society? Who's raising those children? I will offer to you that by my review of our situation, we are largely abdicating our responsibilities. We are largely abdicating our responsibilities to these children, these boys and girls that are at greater risk of developmental and behavioral problems. And as I said earlier, all of them have a greater risk of criminal involvement and incarceration. So let's take a look at families. The impact on the family when one has to go off to prison. Families pay both apparent and hidden cost for the penalties that continue to accumulate even after they are released, sometimes. The debt related to court costs, fines, and other penalties average approximately $15,000 when an offender walks out of prison, which is oftentimes the annual salary for a lot of people. $15,000. The family needs to get that mental health support for their folks, their loved ones, that they can access. I have a hard time accessing mental health support for offenders discharging that need it. Offenders who are getting it in prison, once they get into the community, we can't find it for them. It's not in the community. The CSBs in Virginia that are charged with providing that service have chosen not to prioritize those who are leaving prisons. And we have shared that information with the legislature time and time again for the last 5.5 years that I've served in this capacity in Virginia. And it hasn't changed yet. It hasn't changed. another lost opportunity. Families are impacted when they lose their children, when they go to prison, when they lose their loved ones, when they go to prisons. Families are experiencing permanent decline in income. And they were mostly already severely impacted in terms of finances. There are lost opportunities, especially in education and employment for those who are coming out. The research done by Dr. Western from Harvard University indicated that going back to 1980, the employment of black males between the age of 25 and 34, going back to 1980, has been steadily decreasing. Steadily decreasing. Who is asking any questions about that? The research is public, it's out there. But going back to 1980, black male employment has been steadily decreasing. And guess what? When they go to prison and they come out, that is impacted by a reduction of 40%. So the bad has become even worse to the tune of 40%. Community, what are we doing about it? Women and minorities are especially hard hit. 2 out of 5 black women are related to someone who is incarcerated. 2 out of 5 black women in this country are related to someone who is incarcerated. The Virginia Department of Corrections is the largest mental health institution in the Commonwealth of Virginia. You can't do it all, community. Because 90% of those incarcerated today are coming back to the community. 10% will never leave. But 90% are coming home. How are we setting ourselves up as a community to receive these people coming home? You can blame the DOC till the cows come home. It's not going to solve the problem facing America today. It's not going to solve the problem. I have mothers and girlfriends, and I don't want to pick anybody today. It just came to mind, I'm going to say it. But I have mothers and girlfriends who call me. And they are arguing with me because of actions that have been taken against their children in prison, who are violating the law in prison. And they're arguing the position of their children and loved ones, and they didn't experience what happened. They have no idea what happened beside what that child, that person told them. And even in the face of evidence, these mothers and girlfriends and fiancés are still fighting the cause, as opposed to telling that loved one, buck up and be held accountable.
That's right.
Otherwise, you're just playing right into the game. And like I said before, many come to us with criminal thinking, and they use their own parents and their loved ones. And so I ask you to ask your loved ones when that happens. Encourage others to ask your loved ones a hard question. Did you do it? Prove to me you didn't do it. Before you ask me to join forces with you against the man. I had a father call me the other day. And this father said, Director, I really can't afford to continue sending money to pay for my son's college education in prison. That so breaks my heart. You know what? His son's college education is free. His son's college education is free.
Wow.
He's not paying a penny for it. But for how long has he been getting money from his dad to pay for his college education? You see, folks, we got to wake up and we got to look at facts. We got to ask our loved ones a hard question and not play in to their criminal thinking. The Department of Corrections is a large agency. We are the largest state agency. Unfortunately, We are the largest state agency. We have an authorization of over 12,000 staff. We have a budget of $1.1 billion. We are responsible for 96,000 individuals. We have 30,000 in state-run departments of our prisons. We have 58,000 in community and supervision, probation and parole. We have 7,000 backed up in jails. We have 5,000 in detention centers in the Commonwealth. The challenge is significant. Some days it's frustrating to get up and to go. Some days you don't want to take that phone call from my mom. And I'll listen after I spoke to her over and over again, and she was still championing the cause of her 34-year-old son. Mom is still calling. I said to her, and I probably shouldn't have said it, but I said, listen, you had your chance to raise this boy. Now, allow him to be held accountable.
Yes.
And don't play into the games, because I looked at this case personally, and he was guilty as charged for everything that he was held accountable for. So I said, you had your chance to raise him. He's now a man. Don't play into his criminal thinking. Allow him to be held accountable for his deeds. He didn't register with her. She kept on arguing and fighting. Just let me give you some demographics quickly about the department. But today, of those numbers I gave you, 92% are men and 8% are females. 61% are minorities. 61% of state responsible offenders are minorities. High school dropouts total 46%. As I said earlier, substance abuse amasses 85%. 17% of the offenders with us are on psychotropic medication, which is extremely expensive. And approximately 40% of these state responsible offenders were incarcerated at least once before they came back for this current term they're serving time for. As in the rest of the United States, minorities, especially males, are disproportionately represented. So Virginia is not the exception. So as a nation, what are we doing about it? It's not just Virginia. This is a pattern across the nation. What are we doing about it? Are we happy, acquiescing? The incarceration rate for black men is almost, in Virginia, is 6 times the rate of incarceration for black men. Black community, who are we talking to about this? Now, we call the legislators, but the incarceration rate for black males is 6 times the rate for white males in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the incarceration rate for Hispanic men are twice the rate of incarceration for white males in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that's the challenge, folks. That's what families are encountering, and I gave you the challenge that we are encountering as we prepare to get offenders back home resettled. So what is our response to all the challenges that we're facing? I mentioned to you earlier that the agency must be prepared, because as staff are hired and come in, we're not a staff like one like mine. We're not. When I showed up in Virginia, and I met with executive staff, and I started talking about the importance of reentry, and I started talking about the importance of a healing environment I said, yes, our prisons need to be healing environments. And when I started talking about making sure that we understand dialogue, effective dialogue, not just conversation, and that we're going to study dialogue, eyes glazed over. And some of the executive team members just looked at me. I call them weebies. Because what they were thinking, a lot of them, they were thinking, we be here when you be gone. Okay, so they want to try to outlast people. So they'll try to outlast you. And they'll drag their feet. And not do anything too fast. And that's where strong leadership comes in. Because strong leadership holds people accountable. And they don't let them drag their feet. If they're dragging their feet, you get them out there, you put someone in that place who is going to do what needs to be done.
That's right.
And that's what we have done. We have transformed the agency. We have reorganized. A whole lot of people who were in positions of authority are no longer there. And we have brought new people in of equal mind. And these new people understand what I'm talking about when I talk about a healing environment. These new people understand what I'm talking about when I talk about following the science. And that we have to develop the organization to be able to deliver on the mission and on the vision. You see, research tells us that in any organization, corrections, or any Fortune 500 company, to be successful, you have to know the science, follow the data, evidence-based practices. And that's a whole conversation about evidence-based practices and what you do with them. And how you make sure the fidelity is maintained. So once you implement evidence-based practices with fidelity, then you have to collaborate internally and externally, because no given entity holds all the truth and all the knowledge. So you have to collaborate, and that's what we're seeking to do in the DOC. We're choosing our partners carefully, partners who also understand the science, or at least willing to learn the science. So once you know the science, and you're collaborating, and you're making your partners do the science as well, you must develop the organization to be responsive to where you're going, or you'll get no place fast. That is, you must mind the C word. You have to work on the culture of the organization. And cultures are not developed overnight, good nor bad. Good cultures nor bad cultures are developed overnight. You have to take purposeful steps to get the result that you want and to set the culture that you want to set. I am so proud, as I stand here today, that in 5 years, we have moved the culture in the right direction, simply because we understood that this wasn't about popularity. This is about results. And when we fail, people can die. When we fail, people are not benefiting. And I'm speaking about the returning citizens, and I'm speaking about the community at large in public safety. So we have shifted our culture, and I'm deviating from my text, but that's okay. I will tell you, examples of us shifting our culture. We began in the beginning. I said, okay, folks, we need an infusion of new ideas. We need to create a common language that we cannot understand when we're speaking. So guess what, folks? We are going to start to read. And we're going to read together. We are going to study together.
Yeah.
So the first little book I bought from all of the executive team, every warden, every chief, every member of the 28 members of my executive team, they each got a copy of that book, and they were told you got to read it, and we were talking about it. Not read it and then do what you want to do with it. Read it, talk about it. And that little book prepared and set the stage for the conversation. That little book was written by some professors from Harvard. It's titled, Our Iceberg is Melting. Change is no constant. Our iceberg is melting. It's a book that's written, it's a parody of a larger academic text called Leading Change. But it packed the same message in fewer pages with pretty pictures of penguins. You see, they use an emperor penguin colony to paint the picture of how the iceberg is melting and the things that are necessary for effective change and how each person in the organization can play a role in causing that change to occur. So that's how we set the foundation. That's the first book we wrote. All of those people had to read the Leadership Challenge, research-based book. And what effective leaders were doing. They surveyed over 3,000 leaders in the private and public sector, the authors of this book, Cruzes and Posner. And what they learned is what these leaders were doing when they were able to get their staffs to perform to their optimum best. And that's now part of us. The 10 principles and the 5 practices that came from that research-based text is now a part of the conversation. It's a part of the language and the practice of the Department of Corrections. Practice 1, develop a shared vision. And it's a whole conversation in itself. Practice 2, allow people to challenge the process. Practice 3, enable people to act. Let them do their job.
That's right.
Practice 4, model the way. Be true to your word. You're always being watched. Don't be a hypocrite. And practice 5, encourage the heart. Celebrate accomplishments. Show appreciation to individuals for what they have done.
That's right.
We begin there. And then we get into the principles. And that's become a part of us. That's expected of us. Well, today, over 5 years, that list that started off with Iceberg is Melting is now a list of 28 books. See, we are a learning organization to the true meaning of the word. And then we challenge the process. Let me give you one example of that. Who have heard of Red Onion State Prison? Red Onion State Prison was arguably one of the worst and toughest prisons in the United States. When I got there, 2010, there were 511 inmates in that prison that were in their cells on the average 23 hours a day. They got out to recreate in little cages. There were no programs. There were no schools. And that was purposeful. That was by design. A supermax prison for the worst of the worst offenders in the system. And then looking at data on Red Onion, I saw where 68 individuals that year were released from Red Onion directly into the community. Now, these are people who are so bad that every time they're out their cells at Red Onion or going to see a doctor or wherever, there are no less than 2 officers, and they're shackled and they're moved about, even in the facility. Some of them are so bad that when we take them out, we get police, state police escort following us down the road as their escort. So I said, this doesn't make any sense. So here we got these guys treated in those conditions, the worst of the worst, and then we discharge them, we take them in shackles, 2 officers for 1 offender, We take him to the probation and parole district, take off the shackles, and we tell the chief of probation, good luck. That's absolutely insane. So I told my staff that we are in the business of challenging the process, and we are in the business of taking risk. For all the right reasons. Because if you don't risk, and if you just want to play it safe, nothing will ever change. Right. So you have to take risks for all the right reasons, and you have to challenge the process. So we did that. The legislature gave us no money for this project. But we found it out of our hide because we valued it, and we built a prison. I'm sorry, we built a school at Redaniel. Granted, it's probably the most secure school in the country. But we built a school at Redaniel, and those guys are now going to school. We had 0 programs. Today, we have over 478 programs. Wow. Well, we have cognitive restructuring programs to address criminal thinking. We have a whole plethora of programs to help them re-socialize. So, about 68 or so discharged directly to the community in 2010. By 2012, that number got down to 15. Last year, that number was 2.
Wow.
2.
Come on.
And that's because we challenged the process. We didn't accept the status quo, and we told them your iceberg is melting, prepare for it. And lo and behold, the Virginia Department of Corrections received an award from the National Governors Association, the Southern Legislative Council. We received the Star Award last year for innovation in government. The challenge is tough. The challenge is tough. The clientele can be very tough. The clientele has a lot of deficits. Everything from mental health to academic issues, you name it, criminal thinking, you name it. They have issues. But we must risk. Not when they're ready to be discharged. We must risk while we still have them and have some control over them so that when they walk out, they're doing better. And guess what? The staff in Redaniel, who were not all that keen on this program, no, it's their program.
Yes.
They own it. And they're proud of it because the level of assaults have plummeted, the level of grievances have plummeted, safety has improved significantly. So I have a long list of things that we do, but I hate to brag about all these programs and things that we do. Even though it's important to say. But no, sometimes, I really do sometimes because I think people think that, oh, they're just tooting their horn. But that's why I want to give that example because not only us, but others have realized it. And things have come from it. Let me brag one more time. 2.5 months ago, we were recognized by the White House. The White House, the President to the Department of Justice, recognized us for our step-down program that we implemented. He said that we are one of 5 states in the country that's leading the nation in getting offenders from all lockups, stepping down with the general population to discharge them. And in the last 2 years, Virginia has had at least 14 states send delegations of up to 9. Kentucky had 9 people that came to us for a week. Tennessee, Maine, Nebraska, Florida, to study what we're doing in the department because nationally they're seeing the results and they want to know what we're doing. So the culture of our organization has shifted. And I don't say so anecdotally, because remember, I'm the data guy, evidence-based. We got the services of the Urban Institute, a nationally known research entity out of Washington, D.C. And they came in 4 years ago and did a baseline study, and they got feedback from all of our staff, everyone anonymously, and they set that baseline study. 3 months ago, we got the report from their 4th survey. And the report shows that 84% of the people in the DOC believes that we are going in the right direction.
That's good.
84%. The Urban Institute said that that just blew their minds, because an organization the size of the DOC, with the complexity, they said they don't shift like that. And it blew their minds. Quite frankly, I didn't expect to change that fast either. But I was a good student, and I followed the lessons in our iceberg is melting, and the 10 steps for change, and I lived them, I implemented them, and I required my executive staff to do the same thing. And we got results that even blew the mind of the Urban Institute. And so now they've asked permission, and I've granted them permission to publish our study at the University of Michigan for all to see and to read. So change is not easy, and that's what it's all about. Change is not easy. But like I said, I like the vision of the future better than the history of yesterday.
Yes, sir.
So where do you want to start? Where do you want to spend most of your time? Let me just share with you quickly some of the things that we're doing for offenders in our system. We are currently working right now with 5 community colleges to get Pell Grants to support college programming for those in our system. We are currently the first and only Department of Corrections in the country to have technical vocational courses accredited by the American Council on Education, which has given the inmates that go through our vocational programs college credits for the vocational programs that they're taking in prisons, and they leave us with technical certificates. We are providing for those in our care training so that when they leave us, they have the certification to be commercial drivers, from 18-wheelers going up and down the highway to otherwise. We are providing one of the largest agribusiness operations in the country. We have people certified in agribusiness that can go and work in farms and so forth all over the country, from their dairy operations and so forth. We, the only Department of Corrections in the country that have now had offenders trained and certified as wastewater treatment operators, and they're hired and working in communities right here in Virginia today. I mentioned we have a big agribusiness operation. We now have individuals certified to operate dairy farms. We have a milk plant that we run, and don't tell anybody, but we provide milk to colleges, places all over. They don't know where the milk is coming from. It's all grade A milk. Not only colleges in Virginia. It's all grade A dairy milk. And we're tested just like any other milk producing operation by government officials that come in unannounced and check us in their white suits anytime they want to. You see? We have people that have talent.
That's right.
And they can do a whole host of stuff. But why was not talent uncovered and discovered in the community before they went to prison? They have talent. Why do they have to go to prison to have that talent discovered? And one thing that I like to talk about, because I hear it a lot, and people criticize us a lot about all these phone calls that cost so much money. Prisoners are paying all this money for these phone calls. Well, let me share this with you. When I got here, well, first let me say this to you. Now, when I was in Nebraska, I told the phone company, I don't want a penny in revenue from you. I put everything back in to the phone system to reduce the cost of the phone calls to the offenders and the loved ones. A lot of states, they see it as a revenue-making opportunity to do and pay for things in their systems. When I came to Virginia, I found out that the legislature had passed a bill requiring that $3 million be developed from phone revenues and sent to the General Assembly.
Wow.
And so we have been doing that every year since I've been here because it's the law. But regardless of that, I told GTL, the phone company, I said, I want you to cut costs otherwise. I want you to reduce the cost to the individuals in the system. And Governor Clarke agreed with me since he has been aboard as well. So when I got here, the average phone call for 15 minutes per minute was $4.06. What do you think it is today? 69 cents.
Wow.
69 cents. We chose to do it. The legislature didn't tell us to do it, nor nobody else to do it. And that was why the legislature was still getting their $3 million. We cut the cost to 69 cents. Governor Clarke realized what we were doing. He stepped in last year and he said, I'm going to help you. And he caused the $3 million going to the legislature to be discontinued. The telephone calls in Virginia are among the cheapest in the country that any inmate is being charged, or their loved ones is being charged. So you see, folks, a lot of people's icebergs are melting. A lot of change is happening all around us. Change is going to come. But let me share with you something that my staff wrote down. And this is, remember I talked about the heated environment? And when I first got here and started talking about that, they looked at me like I was crazy. Now, a heated environment has become a staple in the department. We even have a heated environment council made up from a cross-section of staff from across our system. And that council got together and wrote a statement for their colleagues, challenging their colleagues to create and to develop healing environments. And this is what that statement reads. It says, the healing environment is purposefully created by the way we work together and treat each other, encouraging all to use their initiative to make positive and progressive changes to improve lives. It is safe, it is respectful, and ethical, where people are both supported and challenged to be accountable for their actions. And you see, that is spilling over into the prisons. Those that we're caring for now are sensitive. Guess what? And you're also talking about it. So folks, therein lies the challenge that we're facing in corrections, the challenge that we're facing in the community. We must do something about it in corrections. We must do something about it in the community. We have a lot of room to collaborate and to work together. There are no handouts. No handouts. We must step up to the plate and earn what we get. And we must come to the plate with the right intention. I mentioned dialogue earlier, and it's not just simple conversation. We have been studying dialogue as well. I went all the way to England to find Dr. Garrett. Dr. Garrett, Dr. Isaacs, and Dr. Jones. Dr. Garrett is from England, Dr. Isaacs is from MIT, Dr. Jones is from Canada. They got together and formed the College of Dialogos. And I was invited by the Royal Dutch Shell Corporation to join them on the PGA course that the tournament is being played this very week in Texas, in Houston, Texas. On that very PGA course, which is owned by the Royal Dutch Shell, they have a tremendous training center on that PGA course. And I was invited to go down there a few years ago at Shell's instigation, at their expense, to study dialogue with their executives from all over the world. They're bringing their executives in from Germany and Africa and so forth to study at that complex. And I was their guest, as mentioned, and those three individuals were leading that dialogue session. It blew my mind. It blew my mind what they were teaching. It wasn't conversation. It was using words and certain techniques to understand what people are saying, to be able to communicate effectively, and to help bring people into the fold. I don't have enough time to share that with you, but we have been studying dialogue for the last 5 years. And as a result of us studying dialogue, other state agencies have learned about it. Now DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice, is using the same consultant from England to study dialogue. And we have a sole source agreement because nobody else in the United States is doing it. But dialogue, as defined by the College of Dialogos, it's the art of first talking together, which allows us to think together, which allows us to learn together, which allows us to make new meaning together. That is, create new and different realities. And that's what we're working hard to do within the DOC. Just yesterday, I was on the road for 2 days, coming back yesterday, dialoguing with staff and offenders at Bland, the Correctional Center, dialoguing with probation and parole officers, dialoguing at Marion Correctional Institution yesterday with staff and offenders, because it's who we are, we're walking the talk, because it's getting us results. We're talking together, thinking together, learning together, and making new realities together. Thanks for your time.